I don't know what we can talk about in this nation without talking about white superiority, honestly.
Who defines the meaning of God also defines the relationship between economy and God.
African Americans spent $1.3 trillion last year, making us the 16th wealthiest nation in the world. Why have we not turned those riches into wealth to develop our community?
From your understanding and from your knowledge and your background, can you please explain or elaborate on the African presence in ancient America?
All right. That's a foundational question, we might say. That's the question. One thing is that there are many African presences in ancient America. I think that there's a tendency to act as though the Black presence in these various parts of the world is monolithic, but you have a series of migrations or movements, some voluntary, some involuntary. You have African people as the first people to settle on the shores of the Western Hemisphere, tens of thousands of years ago. You have, for example, in Brazil, the remains of an ancient African woman called Lucia, after Lucy or Dinknesh in Ethiopia. These are the skeletal remains of an African woman who lived in Brazil at least 11,000 years ago and probably more. So you have, as we indicated at the beginning, African people as the first people in the Americas. One of the things Ivan Van Sertima used to say, Runoko, it's one thing to say that you were first, but it's quite a different thing to say what you did. And so the next phase we can look at is the role of African people in classical Mesoamerican civilization, especially among the Olmec, the parent civilization, and then the Maya, the Aztec, the Inca, essentially all of them. And then you have Africans who are captured and taken to the Americas against their will. I want to go back to that slide in a moment, against their will. And even now the movement continues. You know, you have Africans from the continent who are students, who are businessmen, who are in the Americas because Africa has been so raped and robbed and pillaged that many people leave Africa in search of a better life. And so what we are talking about now is the second phase, the classical period of American civilization, sometimes called Mesoamerica. Now, this head right here that you see in front of you is the head that was on Ivan Van Sertima's book that came before Columbus. And this is what we call, one of what we call the La Venta heads. Now, there are 20 of these heads, and no two of them look exactly the same. I'm the only person that I know who has seen and examined all 20 of these heads. Even when Ivan wrote the book that came before Columbus, which was published in 1977, only 14 of those heads have been identified. So they're still finding them. So go back to that picture and let's talk about it for a moment. Let's use that as an illustration. Can we see that head again? It looks a little bit like you, my brother. This is another one, but it's fine. We can use this as an example. The one I was using was the one that was on the cover of the Van Sertima book that came before Columbus. But this is located in the same area. There are 20 of these heads, and they are divided into 4 areas. The first 10 are from an area called San Lorenzo. San Lorenzo is important because it's the first settlement that we know of in the Americas. And so you have 10 of the heads from there. Of that site, only 1 is still there. 7 are in Jalapa, Mexico. 2 are in Mexico City. And then you have the La Venta heads, of which there are 7. La Venta is the second major Olmec site. 4 of the heads from La Venta, the best ones, have been moved to the neighboring state of Tabasco. La Venta is in Veracruz. In the 1950s, a Mexican oil company, I believe called Pemex, found oil here and decided to move the 4 best heads to Villahermosa, Mexico, in Tabasco. That's where this one is. And then you have 3 badly damaged heads that are still in La Venta. And then you have 2 heads from a place called Trezapotes. Trezapotes is the 3rd big Olmec site. And then you have 1 more from a place called Cobata. The Olmec are important to us because they are the parent civilization of the Americas. All the other civilizations come after the Olmec, the Aztec, the Inca, the Maya, the Toltec, the Teotihuacan people all come after the Olmec. And the Olmec, according to Ivan Van Sertima, and I'm a disciple of that, had an African element inside it. Dr. Van Sertima didn't say, and here he disagrees with some other scholars, that the Olmec were African. He said that at a certain time in history, a small group of Africans, a fleet of ships from the Nile Valley, sailed across the Atlantic and entered the Olmec world and turned it out. They showed how to move large objects in stone. They introduced calendars. They introduced major forms of advancements in agricultural science. And as a result of that, those Africans who came from the Nile Valley were given an exalted-like status. And this is the controversy, because many people would have us believe that our history only began with slavery. And I ain't having that. And Ivan didn't have that. This one right here is the one with the braids in the back. And this is one of the Tresepotes heads. And it's very, very powerful. As I say, no two of the heads look alike. They're scattered in Mexico City, in the state of Veracruz, and in the state of Tabasco, all 20 of them. Yeah, those are the braids. And this is the only one with braids. Now, we don't know who these Olmec heads represent. Leo Wiener, who I talked about at the beginning, who mentioned that he's the first scholar of any ethnic group that I'm aware of to really deal comprehensively with the African presence in ancient America. He believed, and this is astonishing, but we're talking 1920, 100 years ago, he believed that those heads represented slaves. One of those heads weighs 100,000 pounds. Even common sense would tell you that who would build a massive head, 100,000 pounds, for a slave, and the master is not represented. This is the first head that was identified. And this one was identified in the 1860s by a Mexican scholar named Jose Melgar, who said it looked Ethiopian. Now, this is in the 1860s. This is the first head that was identified, and this is one of the Tresepotes heads. The one with the braids is the companion head of this. Now, you would think, at least I would think, that just looking at these heads, you would say, there's a brother, there's a black man. But we have been so ingrained with a sense of inferiority, or the inferiority, the view, the general view, that many people think that black people never did anything, that even when you're looking at it, you're not able to digest what you are saying. I think that's called cognitive dissonance.